All right, guys, we are here with Chris Alba. I'm so bad with names. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. So I always think about it. I always think of Jessica Alba when I think of Chris. And then he walks up and, he's probably just about the same height. So
Yeah,
uh,
I don't know how tall she
I don't
is.
know how
So.
tall she is either. But Chris is an awesome guy. I met him several years ago when I was doing some modeling. I was doing some runway shows and stuff like that, and he was actually part of one of the first ones that I was a part of. So we got to meet way back then. He was doing some things with different models and having a talent agency at the time. And since then, he has done some incredible work and done all kinds of things. We've stayed in contact. And this last weekend, we were both up at Victory Light. I got to see him, got to really reconnect, give him a big hug. It was good. He got to be introduced to my fiance, and we got to spend some time together and just kind of chat for a little bit. So I told him, I said, hey, you were doing some incredible things with people and really trying to raise the vibration of people and get them into a place where they are really more in touch with themselves and creating good things in the world. And so I was like, hey, we should talk about that because that's an important thing. We're all here, looking at taking our life from where it is to where we want to be and where we need to be to really affect the most change in the world. And Chris is right in line with all of that. So Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Oh man, it's interesting because the origin story to me is the part that I've released, and that's what shifted the most for me. The holding on to the goods and the bads, the met and unmet expectations of how I thought life was supposed to be. But it showed me that it could show up differently. As of where I sit right now, my path has led me up to here, and I've done a lot of different jobs and had a lot of different careers and had a lot of different experiences. I started out as a high school dropout and worked my way through the sales industry and made a lot of money and started some businesses and things. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and I was reminiscing about a guy who committed suicide. And when I was talking to his mom about, story of him, and she said, the one thing he always said about you is when doors close, you just open another one. He said, you don't get stuck. You just go. And I was like, it kind of reminded me of the Matrix movies where they went into that doorway, that hallway, and all those doors were aligned. And, I've always looked at that, looked at life that way, and, say, okay, well, it showed up this way. What are we going to do about it? And it doesn't mean that I didn't have my struggles and my suicide attempts and my addictions and, all those things that kept me what we would call now a low vibration of a human being, because we're all energy. And so we're trying to quantify this consciousness of, how do we discern, what's a positive and a negative energy. When we really think about energy as a whole, it has to contain both for it to exist. It has to have contrast. So, what's good without bad, what's up without down, because those are mental concepts.
Next week, I have an interview with Craig Holliday. He
Okay.
was at Victory Light. Just an incredible guy. He did a talk and wrote a book called Fully Human, Fully Divine.
Okay.
And one of the things that he had talked about in that, which is just incredible to me, actually, he gave me one of his books and I've been reading it. So one of the things he talks about is that he spent a lot of his life trying to be very separated. Like he wanted to be the monk up on the mountaintop, right?
Right.
And what he realized is that that was only part of the story. It wasn't until he chose to embrace his humanity and
Mm-hmm.
embrace the entirety of life itself that he found transformation and he
Right.
found what he was looking for. And I think that's the same thing that you're saying there, is that we have to have both, right? We
Right.
have to have
Right.
those negative things that drive us towards the positive things. We need to be able to balance that in our life. And that's when when we can fully embrace that, that's when we can get to a place where our vibration level goes up. Because when we take time and we just push that stuff to the side, we really don't get rid of it, right? It just stays there, and then it festers and causes more problems, and then it comes out in other areas of our life, and we end up struggling with other things. One of the things that I notice in my own life is that there are certain things that I thought that I dealt with. Like, I was like, hey, I already took care of that. That's not a problem. And then all of a sudden it crops up, and I'm like, oh, I didn't take care of that as well as I thought I did.
Yeah, thanks for showing back up so I can heal again.
Let me take care of it again.
Yeah, and see, that's what really separated, because I mean, I went through, going through the sales and the business and all that. Of course, I did the personal development and the leadership and, all the egoic stuff to help me move through, what I would say are universal principles. And what shifted for me was after the losses of my businesses, through my failure to respond properly, but wasn't my fault. My business partner was embezzling money from his financial firm, and he got caught. So he went to jail, and they closed our businesses. So it was like, and when all that was crumbled, I had a huge identification in what I did, and I was a photographer, and I had a talent agency, I had all this stuff, and I was helping all these people, and I was doing all this great stuff, and then I couldn't get anyone to call me back. I was all alone with a brand new baby, and, just trying to figure out, like, what do I do now? I've put everything I had into this stuff, and now it's gone. And that's when I started looking, I went back to the things that I knew, like Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, and, how to win friends and influence people, and, all those classics. But I was like, that's what led me to this point now. So what am I going to do different? And so then I started studying a lot of spirituality, and I was like, man, spirituality and leadership's a lot alike. But, again, it's coming from this place of an intentionality, and, as it says in Tantra, and I think Deepak Chopra said it once, intentions are attention given directionality that are fueled by our imagination and our emotions. So if that's anything that we do, it's going to bring us good stuff. I remember when I started doing coke, I was like, this stuff is awesome. I can focus, I can do all this shit, I can go without sleep, I'm like superhuman, it's awesome. Until, like, I had developed a huge coke habit, and then it started becoming destructive. And I think that happens with networking. I think that happens with yoga. I think that happens with meditation, or anything that we get that brings us pleasure, is finding that balance in that. And when we're living vicariously through other people's teachings and trying to seek self, we don't know until we experience it. And then once we experience it, then we're like, oh, how do I get out of this? How do I put myself in this situation? How do I shift these conditions? How can I grow? And so that led me to a program that we developed. It's developed. And we launched it on our website, enhancingyourworld.com. But it's called the Gauge Method. And it's an acronym for gratitude, awareness, unity, growth, and energy. And the reason we use those 5 principles is because they're principles. They're not methods. See, what brings you happiness, joy, fulfillment, ecstasy, all those things, it's going to be a little different for me. So when we come from a place of you have to do as I say because this is how I experienced it, it's never going to be the same for someone else because we're individual egos, and that's just our self-centered perception. It's not good or bad. It just is. It's where we come from in this reality of life.
It's interesting because I come from such a different place. Some of the things that I do you know, people look at me and they're like, what the hell is wrong with you? Why would you put yourself through that? Why would you even do that? So, you know, when we were doing things together, you know, I was doing the whole modeling thing and everything like that. And shortly after that, I did that for a few years. And then I got into, I got back into sports, and I got into these crazy obstacle course races. And then I got into the serious stuff because, I mean, if you are around me any length of time, you know that I am a pretty extreme person. I go from one extreme to the other. I've always been that way. I always jump in 110%. So I get into these long, crazy military-style endurance events, and what fuels me is so different from what fuels other people, because most people would never want to do something like that. And to me, getting involved in something like that teaches me so many lessons that I can't learn in other circumstances. Like I learned, one of the biggest things that I learned while I was doing that is that we all have to have other people. Like, can't do life alone. Like, it's important that we lean on other people, because, you know, there are just situations in life where we don't know how to make it through, and we need other people's expertise to help us do that. When you are on the side of the mountain and you are tied in and you're running out of food, and, you know, you're trying to navigate this ledge that's only 2 feet wide, you have to be able to depend on those other people to secure your life. And I really appreciated learning those things, because it brought me back to this place now where I can really appreciate my friends and the people that are around me for what they've added to my life. And, you know, it's one of the reasons why several months ago I contacted you, and I was like, listen, we need to reconnect, because, you know, you are an important part, and what you're doing is an important part of what I'm doing currently. And to be able to really work together and create that community is so important. It is those communities that ultimately change the world around us. You know, it all starts with one person deciding that it's time to change, and then it just goes out from there, like a ring, like a ripple in a pond. It's incredible.
Well, I mean, and we're all energy. So when we're vibrating at different frequencies, we either take or we, you know, I mean, it's just it's like an acceptance thing. You know, it's the unconditional love, and our diversity actually strengthens us, even though it does make our lives a little more complicated. You know, when everybody's the same and they think the same and they do the same, well, then it feels really comfortable, because you're not, you know, life's not showing up unexpectedly, or, you know, it's showing up very consistently. And why I agree, you know, I used to do a lot of like mountain climbing and things like that, so I totally understand where you're coming from. With the extreme stuff, I also find it works the same in business and in everyday life. And, you know, what we really want to focus on at Enhancing Your World is that community is helping enhancers help people, which is what we call people who are trying to help people, bridge the gap to those who are seeking help, because we're all equally human. And our methods and our stories and our compassion may separate us, but it also unites us. And that's the cool thing about it. You know, that's the cool thing about unity, and that's the cool thing about unconditional love is, you know, I might not want to condition myself to do the events that you're doing, but just as I interviewed you on the podcast, I enjoyed hearing the stories and living the experience vicariously through you. Because, you know, I have much respect for those that put themselves out there and do things like that. You know, I just don't do that as much as I used to, and I can still cherish that people enjoy doing that. It's just not my thing.
One of the things that my fiance reminds me of all the time is that
they're great for that.
I am very grateful for it. She reminds me all the time that, you know, everybody has a different experience of life, and everybody learns in different ways. And not everybody has to go to the top of the mountain or carry 60 pounds in a backpack for 20 miles to get the same kind of experience. We get it in different ways. So we don't all have to go through this incredible amount of self-imposed suffering to find transformation.
Right.
And there are times, because I'm such an extreme person, that I don't realize that, I don't recognize that. And there are people like my fiance and other people that have to ground me and remind me, like for example, she had a really, her son, she was pregnant, of course, had her son. She did it with no medication. She did it in her own home. She had a serious bleeding issue afterwards. And she was like, listen, I suffered enough doing that. I went through all of that. I think I paid my dues when it comes to the suffering. And we laugh about that, but it's true. Everybody learns differently. And it is, I've talked a lot about this week. It is really who we resonate with, and who we find that connection with, that we can find transformation. So, in coaching, a lot of times, everybody's like, well, I need clients, and we're all worried about that. But in reality, there are people that are going to resonate with me that don't resonate with you. There are people that are going to resonate with you that don't resonate with me. And that's fine.
Right.
Because we all have our own community that we need to work with. And those are the people that that we're entrusted with, that we need to take care of and help guide wherever we need to guide them.
Right.
I've been talking with all kinds of people from Victory of Light, and this is an expo where there are so many different modalities, right? So many different points of entry into looking at one thing, looking at spirituality, getting quiet, and what method do you use for that? Do you use crystals? Do you use singing bowls? Do you chant this? And ultimately, it doesn't matter the medium that you use.
Right.
The goal is to get there, right?
Right.
Like, it doesn't matter whether you drive a Lamborghini or a Buick Regal. Doesn't matter. It still gets you to your destination. So I think being focused on that is so important, just looking at that. And there are so many incredible people that are doing so many incredible things, and just honoring those people for what they're doing is what I try to do all the time.
Right. Well, and it's very interesting because, you're right. It is an intentional direction that we walk in, and the rest of the way, it's the journey. So, I look at life in a very humorous way. I have a very light heart. But, I sit in traffic, and to me, it doesn't matter. I have a cell phone, so I can text or call ahead and let people know that I'm not going to meet the expected time. So I can communicate, right? So, there's no hard feelings there. And, I'm looking around, listening to the radio, not the radio, but music or whatever, and I'm just enjoying my time. And I look around with these people driving these fancy cars, and how pissed off they are, and how angry they are, and how they're trying to edge and try to cut through traffic. And it's just okay, it takes, that's just where they're at, and it's if I spent $50,000 on a car, I'd want to spend some time in it. But they're so worried about getting to the next destination, they're not even enjoying the ride. Yeah.
This last weekend, I did a race. We did a 5K, and we drove there. I drove with, we did it as a kickboxing studio. So a bunch of my clients went down there, and we ran the race together. And so I rode there with one lady, and we got there, no problem. So I rode back with one of my employees because I didn't drive. I did a half a mile of burpees, and I didn't think that I would be able to drive back on my own. So I was like, somebody else should drive me.
Sure.
So again, me being extreme, I can't even run a 5K without doing something miserable. But I don't know. But anyway, we did that. And on the way back, she's driving, and she is a super aggressive driver. And she is yelling at people in the car. And I was like, hey, listen, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but nobody outside of your car can hear you. The only people that are affected by your bullshit right now is us. And I don't really want to hear it. There's no reason to be upset. And I remind people of that all the time. Listen, if you're yelling and screaming in your car, you are not affecting the other person in the other car. The only person that's being affected is you. And how I've always tried to look at it, I don't really get frustrated in traffic very much, mainly because I always thought of it this way. This is the universe's way of slowing me down so that I'm not the one in the accident, right?
Sure.
Like if there's, if it's construction, if it's an accident, maybe this is the universe's way of holding me back from something that could be potentially horrible for me.
Sure.
So I'm here in this place. I might as well just enjoy it.
Right.
There's no reason to get all frustrated and angry. We have enough stress in our life in other areas rather than me creating my own.
Sure. Actually, I would challenge the fact that you couldn't affect people outside of your car, because when I see people screaming at me, I laugh. So at least they lighten my mood. So because I'm not going to take offense to it.
Yeah.
Like I don't do that anymore. When people get angry, I'm just like, dude, that's your karma. Like I don't create your emotions. I might trigger your emotions, but I create my own emotions. Like that's the level of mastery in the practice. And, it does take time to do that. And it takes consistency, and neuroscience can now prove that, but it's no different than any ancient philosophy. Just choose your flavor. You know what I mean? Like choose the teacher that pumps you up, or, because it's all greater awareness. It's not truth. It's a reflection of truth.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really separated for me when I started doing the Gauge method personally. Before I published it, before I started training, I did it myself. And that's what shifted me, because it was just, I never got caught up in whatever teaching it was that I was looking into. I just was like, oh, well, this makes sense. And this is why this does this. And this is just like this. And okay, affirmations are just conditioning your mind, and you're only going to see what you're going to see. And, when we come into balance with our masculine and feminine energies, which we all are, we are duality, manifested, as the Buddhist said, we're a representation of our psyche. That's our being. So wherever we are in our mind is how we behave. And if we feel lack or fear or insignificant or not heard or not loved or whatever, we come out of place of instinct, out of reaction. And when we learn to come into harmony with, we can only do what we can do, and we can only control what we can control, and that's ourselves. We can become our responsibility for our vibration, our ripple effect of causation of effect can change. So it's really it's looking at that word responsible and looking at it in a different way, because we all feel like we're responsible for making change out in the world, and we can't change the world. We can only change ourselves.
Yeah.
And how we live teaches everybody else the boundaries and the ideas and the awarenesses of how they could raise their vibration so they could live happier. Whether they do it or not, that's on them. Like, that's what I truly learned about coaching and, all that. Like, even when people pay money and say, I am committed, and then they're not committed, that's part of their process. And my job as a guide, as a healer, as a, whatever you want to label me, is to just hold space and say, where you're at is enough right now. And where you want to go is where you haven't gotten yet. Because if you had everything you ever needed, why would you move?
Yeah. Well, I think,
why would you be stressed? Why would you be like, and it's creating that holistic way of life that creates the wholeness in our being. So I think stress comes from creating expectations that we haven't reached yet, which can be a good thing and done in a healthy way. But it's also, I think, why a lot of people numb themselves out and drink and intoxify and, oppress other people and, all the other lower vibration stuff. It's to push away the negative stuff. When people tell me, well, I'm a good person, I deserve better. And I'm like, okay, well, what's a bad person and what do they deserve? Because that's all judgment.
Yeah.
You know, from self to I'm doing what I feel is right. Okay, awesome. But you're also causing an effect that's affecting other people. So if other people are telling you, hey, you're hurting me, and you're just like, I don't care, you know, I'm in charge of my destiny, and, you know, I'm in control of my stuff, and you just won't accept my way of being. And it's like, well, you have to accept their way of being too. That's unconditional, not just here's me and you're either going to accept me or not, because, you know, I can only be conditional. You know, it's
for the last, not the last, but several years, that was exactly who I was. I mean, I was that guy that didn't give a shit what anybody else thought. I was going to be me, and I was going to do what I wanted to do. And I really believed at the time, you know, not having the information that I do now, that that was the way that I needed to be for business and for other things. What I have come to realize, being a little bit more self-aware now, is that, you know, I'm constantly affecting the people around me. My mood, my attitude, the language that I use is all affecting the people around me. And if I'm not aware enough to understand that I need to control myself, because I'm the only person that I can control anyway, if I'm not taking the time to really do that, then I'm not doing what I should be doing, because I should be concerned about how other people's experience of me is. And for a long time, I was not that way.
Right. I would say be observant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just observe it. Like, because again, it's all awareness, right?
Well,
So
they were for sure telling me that, Jeff, you are an asshole. Like you are making my life miserable. And I was like, I'm not. I'm just being who I am. You can accept it. Either accept it or don't. And I was like, and it caused me a lot of stress, a lot of grief in my life, because I was unwilling to bend. I grew up where I had to survive, and I had to do it all on my own. So growing up that way, I was really like, you know what? I'm going to do it however the hell I want to, and I don't care what anybody else thinks about it. And man, it destroyed my relationships. It destroyed my friendships. And, you know, now I'm like, you know what? I just need, I need to be me, but I need to be concerned about other people, especially as I've gotten to this place where, you know, we mentioned, you know, well, we didn't mention it. I was thinking it. But Tony Robbins talks about the 6 human needs, right?
Right.
And there was a long time that I was really driven by significance and certainty. I wanted to be certain that everything that I had was going to be good. I was going to do this. I was going to do that, that I had stability. And I wanted to make sure that I was the most important thing in anybody's life around me. And it was an empty pursuit, right? I got to this place where I was like, this is like, I'm never going, it's not possible to have those things. I'm going to be constantly upset and frustrated because I can't get to that place. It's not realistic. And going back and really doing a lot of personal work, what I came to find out is that the 2 things that really drive me is contribution and growth. I constantly want to grow. I want to learn. I want to experience more. I want to be able to do all those things, but I really want to be able to give back, like all the things that I've had, the experiences in my life. And I think that that's what brings it full circle, right? When we get to that place where we're now contributing more than we're focused on anything else. You know, we've got to be able to help other people and to give them some of the knowledge that we've gained over a lifetime of struggling and dealing with these things.
Well, being an ego, you know, just coming from our own point of view. Or, I mean, again, it's not a bad thing. It's just like you said. I mean, we've nailed it. You know, we've hit a lot of. Actually, we've talked about every principle in the Gage method. Actually, it's funny. You know, I think that's an important part of it, is realizing that we all want to grow. So how do we share the awareness? You know, how do we, you know, because I remember after I was hurt, and then I started learning about like GMOs and, you know, like the conspiracies and, you know, all that stuff. I was already angry. I was hurt. I was frightened. I was all those things because I was uncertain. Everything I was certain of was just gone. and you know, and I had been there multiple times through, you know, my house being broken into and everything being taken to, you know, and having a couple of those different cycles in my life. This time was that one where I was looking at it and I'm like, I have a son now, and you know, I was looking at, you know, committing suicide again, and a vision popped into my head was like, well, what are people going to say? Like when you're not here to continue to tell the story. And so then I got really attached by telling the story because people could relate to it. And then I realized, well, I have to lose that attachment to the story to heal.
Yeah.
You know, if I use that as my sword and go, look, or my prize, and say, hey, look at all this tough shit I went through and look at how I've come through it. Yeah, that's true. But if they're in the spot that they're in and they just hear me say that and I make it sound so easy, then they're going to discount it. And it's simple, not easy. And I think that's what makes it difficult, because our mind wants to have, like, you know, it can only go backwards or forwards. It's not really good in the present, right? So we're always looking back or projecting forward and saying, is this where I want to be? You know, whether we're conscious of that or not. And I think that's where meditation and mindfulness and, you know, the practices of being aware of how we relate to ourselves and how is a reflection to how we relate to others.
I know, you know, you've heard a lot of my story and my background.
Sure.
And I've gotten to that place where, you know, my history is my history. Right. Mm-hmm. There's nothing I can do to go back there and change any of those events. But what I have done is I really have come to a place where I've accepted all of those things.
Sure.
And as difficult as they were to grow up that way and to go through those things, it has made me who I am today. It has shaped me, and it has given me the awareness that I have, the ability to really deal with other difficult things. And, you know, taking that time to really go back and accept it all and say, you know what, I wouldn't wish any of that stuff on anybody else. Like, right. I would not want you to have to go through that. But I'm thankful that I went through it. I'm thankful that I dealt with all those things, because it has made me an incredibly strong person, an incredible personality, and to be able to really help other people that are dealing with similar things and say, you know what, I really do understand that. I do understand what you're dealing with, because I went through it too.
Right.
You know, I think it's great to be able to do that. I talked to somebody yesterday, and we did an interview, and we had talked about going back, and we had talked about quantum physics and all kinds of stuff, and that the past is malleable. It's a very interesting concept to be able to go back and to change not really what happened, but change our perceptions of what happened.
Right. It's all an awareness. Right.
Yeah.
Looking at it from a different way.
Exactly. Like going back and really understanding that, you know what, this happened, but you know what, there were other things that happened that we're happy too. So really changing that event in our lives to change our perspective on it and how that affects us in the present and in the future. Because we sit around and we hold on to these things, these events that have happened in our past that were so debilitating to us, and we allow those things to take root in our life now and continue to go on in the present. And if we can change our perspective on how those things affected us at the root, we can change the domino effect that happens in the rest of our life from that event. So.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and as a Reiki master and energy healer, I can verify that.
Yeah.
That the energy blocks are there, and there's multiple ways to heal from that. And one is mindset development and training and cognitive, you know, behavior therapy and all those different things to change your neural connections and to do all that. And then the other way is more of the ancient philosophies of stillness and practice and energy and just releasing and surrendering and clearing. And, you know, it's a very different way of looking at it. It's a different philosophy. Like I said, what really shifted for me over the last 5 years or so is that, you know, I was all about, you know, I'm certified in cognitive behavior therapy and all that fun stuff, science, and I enjoy learning about it because it mirrors what I have learned about ancient science or spirituality or whatever label you want to put on it. And that's what I found. There's universal truths, and, you know, everybody's talked about them and they give them labels, and, you know, and they've all changed, depends on the teacher and the, you know, the conditions. And, but that's it. And the thing that I learned about from Tantra is the reason there's so many teachings and poems and things like that is we're all unique expressions of the same consciousness. So while the methods or the flavors, or, you know, Brian Tracy said, if we think about life as going to a buffet and all these types of different foods are there, well, we're all going to take different stuff in different quantities, but we don't go back to the table and go, hey, you should go eat this because it's fucking awesome. I don't know why you didn't get it. What the fuck's wrong with you? Excuse my language. You know, it's like, you know, if we look at it from that simplistic of a way, like, wow, like life can be so easy, but everybody's from this state of defensiveness or this lack, or, you know, trying to prove themselves, or, you know, like, you know, create this huge legacy that they make up in their own mind instead of realizing that, like, once I'm dead, I can't tell my story. So how I affect others is my legacy. You know, like, that's the only way it's going to continue on. I mean, and if you want to look at extraordinary, and I don't have any judgment or anything like that. I'm just looking at energy as a duality, and how we live between those two boundaries is the consciousness or the cognitive path, right? Where we're walking. But Martin Luther King Jr. and Hitler, you know, we both know about them. We know a little bit about each one of their stories, but we don't know their truth because we weren't them.
Yeah.
We don't know what kept them up at night. We don't know what inspired them. We don't know, you know, I mean, a lot of people don't know that the United States, you know, was found guilty in a lawsuit, Mrs. King won, that proved that the United States hired the mafia to kill Martin Luther King. And, you know, that came out, and no one, you know, it's out there and you can research it, but it wasn't in that, you know, the majority of media. And she was asked why, and she said, because I don't want to taint his legacy. And if everybody found out the truth when they're not ready to hear the truth, they're going to get angry.
Yeah. That's interesting. I know
and Hitler was a popular guy till, you know, he started doing what he was doing. Yeah. You know, I mean, he won elections. You can't be charismatic and not influence people. Yeah. One way or another, you know, however we discern that.
So a couple things that I was thinking there. One is, as far as the buffet is concerned, I'm like, for real, the asshole that will grab the food off your plate and be like, hey, that looks good, I'm going to try that. I'm kind of that guy. So constantly creating chaos just to see what happens, right? So there are people like that enter our life. Oddly enough, I had a couple come in and their last name is Chaos.
Right on.
And I was like, you guys are going to create a lot of chaos. I can see it already.
Yeah. Like, did they plan that, or did that just was somebody born with that name?
They were born with that. Very interesting. It was K-A-O-S, but it's still chaos.
Yeah.
It's just very interesting how that happens. I'm curious to see how they interact, because there's got to be something to that. There's got to be.
Well, I've been married almost 19 years, and I can tell you, when you can thrive in chaos, you can come in harmony.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not either good or nor bad. It's just how do we communicate as long as we're going through it. Like if we can share openly without, getting hurt. I mean, and it will hurt, but we have to breathe through it, I mean, that's why there's all these fundamental, practices that are universal, like breathing, that all keep us alive.
Yeah.
I mean, breathing is a great example because it's the only thing you can do consciously and unconsciously at the same time.
We get back to that when we talk about meditation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of meditation begins with focusing on your breath.
Sure.
Really taking.
Well, that's one modality. That's one method.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And just taking that time to focus on those very basic things to really ground yourself to what you're doing.
Sure.
Yeah, and breath is a huge thing. We talk about that in yoga when you're doing yoga positions, is making sure that you're breathing properly, the different types of yogic breathing. It's very interesting. There is a whole science in that of its own. Oh,
sure.
That was the other thing that I was going to say. In a past life, no, in this life, just earlier on, I love to read, right? I am a voracious reader. In doing that, I used to believe that it was all the facts that I knew, all these quotes and things that I could throw out there, and this would just change people's life. What I found out through all of that is nobody cares about any of that stuff. What they care about is how is this going to affect me now?
Right.
Like, how can I find help for whatever I'm going through? How can I find transformation for whatever I'm dealing with and move to that next place where I need to go? All the facts and everything are great for my own self-edification, but it doesn't really help anybody else but me.
Right.
So that was, that's another awareness that I had to learn through the years, is that, what? I love the information. I'm one of those people that need that information. But by and large, most other people just need to be helped.
Right.
Period.
Well, they just want to know that you're there. It's funny because speaking of awareness, one of my favorite sayings that I say is you can't say the right thing to the wrong person or the wrong thing to the right person. And the only thing that differentiates that is timing. Mm. And all we can do is plant seeds of awareness. So whether they're willing to accept it now or they come back 5 years later and go, you know what, I didn't like that, what you said or what you did or whatever, but now I'm very grateful for it. And thank you. I need to thank you for that, because that was that chink in my armor that made me take a different look. And so and that's what I'm trying, through the Gauge method to preach, but not preach is, it's not, there is no right or wrong way. There's only the way. I mean, that's Zen. There's only, the mental boundaries that we put on it of right and wrong are how we're going to move through it. And once we become aware of, well, we don't like this outcome or whatever, that's when we have to shift. And so I think that's why information is important, because once you have the cognitive ability, and actually I think it's a subconscious thing after a while, we just get so programmed, we program ourselves to do it, that we automatically shift to a more grateful thought, a higher vibration thought. Where when people aren't used to that, because what I found when I started talking about the Gauge method, people are like, that's true, that's true, that's true, that's true, that's true, and then they wouldn't move. And I'm like, well, if it's true, then why isn't it shifting you? If you agree with what I have to say, and it makes sense, and it feels good and all that, like, what keeps you stuck? And the stickiness is the fear of the unknown, which it's all unknown, because we can't go past this moment in our true being. We can in our mind, we can visualize, we can imagine, but that's just a reflection. And how we unify that imagination or intention or goal or whatever that carrot on that stick is to move us in that direction, how that feels through our heart and through our actions and just our everyday behavior, that's our compass, that's our guide, that's our intuition. And when we learn to listen to that, it's not so much about the observations of what everybody else says, but how we relate to what's said.
Yeah, I think I talked earlier about just that fact that we need to get quiet and listen to what's going on, like what is being spoken to us, not necessarily by other people or anything, but what we hear inside of ourselves, those guideposts that are screaming at us sometimes that this is the direction you need to go, this is where you need to be. They're doing it. It's there all the time, but so often we're just not listening.
Right. They call it the observer.
Yeah.
You know, become the observer. So, and that creates space, right? So you observe your thoughts and your feelings prior to your behavior. So it's like there's a little gap. And the more we practice that, like Eckhart Tolle has talked about this and so many other people. And when we practice that, and this has just been my experience, that gets out a little bit more and our mind is less attached. So what I tend to have to remind some people about is I don't have much forethought. I just let it flow. And the reason for it was, you know, I used to think, well, I want to give this person this information, or I want to give this person this. And that's my judgment of what they need. And whether they heard it or not was whether I was right or not. So now I just trust in the universe and trust in my intuition and say, you know what comes out, comes out. And when I hurt somebody, they usually say, you know, if it wasn't coming from you, I'd be pissed off. But I know your intention is not to hurt me, but to help me. So I appreciate that you took the time to tell me.
Yeah.
And it's a shift. It wasn't like that at all. And I've lost friends over it because they weren't the right ones. They weren't ready to walk that path. They weren't ready to walk alongside with us. They wanted to stay back and hang out with where they were hanging, which is in the past, which is fine. Like if that's all the farther they want to journey, as you know, and your extreme, you know, sports and things like that, some people get to a plateau and they're like, that's it, I'm done.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's their level. That's as far as they're wanting or willing or whatever to go. And they just go, that's it. And that's fine. Now I can use that energy to go to do something else because I'm still alive. I'm still aware that I'm alive. I'm still breathing. And going back to the breath, you know, some of the simplest practices is if you're feeling tired, do a rapid breathing exercise such as a fire breath or cobra breath or anything like that, because it's going to increase your heart rate. And it's going to, you know, release the hormones and feel goods and, you know, all that stuff. And it's going to raise our vibration. Or if we're feeling anxious, we just have to take big, deep breaths. I mean, the practices are very simple, but it's the continuation of our practices that continue our results.
Yeah.
So while we're always looking and observing new information, we're using it to how can we relate it to other people.
Exactly.
So it is important for us to be diverse in our awarenesses and be able to talk with some intelligence about a level to carry on a conversation. But also it's very aware, like you said, to be the student and just go, I don't know what I don't know, and I just know a smidge. You know different stuff because you've read different books. You've had different experiences. So while we can relate in that harmony and share an exchange, that's energy flow. And if we can't do that, you know, on an intellectual level, well, then we have to do it on a physical level. And if we can't do it in the physical level, that's okay. We have to go in another direction. And it's not that we don't love them anymore. I'm thinking of my family and who struggles with addiction and stuff like that. But they're dangerous to our vibration, our well-being.
One of the things that we've really that I've been talking about, and my fiance is really good at reminding me of this, is that boundaries are so important when it comes to that, and having those healthy boundaries with other people, because there are those people that will try that hang on, that we really need to leave and move on towards what we're doing. And for our own highest good, it doesn't mean that we don't care about them, that we don't still have love for them, that we don't still, you know, want to see their best selves. But Sometimes they just need to go and do their own thing, and we need to
Right.
go and do our own thing. And
Sure.
we have to set up those boundaries to say, hey, I can't get text from you at 1 o'clock in the morning, telling me about all your problems and everything that's going on. That can't happen. I have to sleep, right?
Right.
They're just simple boundaries that need to go up. I have not been the best person with boundaries. Shocking. But I've struggled with that for most of my
Sure.
life.
Yeah.
And being reminded of that, hey, you have an ex that is causing problems. You should probably not talk to that person, and you should leave that in the past where it needs to be and move forward to the future. And there are so many people that are struggling with that.
Right. Well, even family members, and I think we just came across a holiday, and I'm over there and doing our thing, and we're meat free now, and we're doing things different, not of tradition. And it was constantly like reminded, oh, well, you're breaking tradition, this is tradition, this is tradition. And I'm thinking, yeah, but this is why you're suffering, and that's fine, that's your thing. Like, I accept that you've chosen to be there, I've chosen to be here, I can discern the difference, the gap, but you know what, I accept you, and I would just ask for you to accept me the same. If you want to go and you want to do things, my friend Sharon Livingston said this. She's a psychiatrist, psychologist, and all kinds of other stuff. But she gave me this visualization. She said, people that are hurt are scared. They're like carrying two machetes and they're slashing at everything. And so if they're not ready to hear you yet, they're going to cut you. So, you're going to want to jump in there and you're going to want to stop them because, they're going to hurt themselves or other people, right? So they're going to get you as you're trying to go in there to help them. Or we can sit back. We can try to talk to them. We can try to calm them down. We can try to fertilize the environment. We were talking about burying thoughts and, emotions earlier. And, that reminds me of compost. If you bury it, then eventually it comes back up as fertilizer or the BS of our belief system. Because, it just becomes so deeply rooted that we don't have an awareness that it's even being pulled from that. Like the time I spent in the adult industry, like I just came to a new awareness the other day that the whole reason I did that was because I knew I could make a lot of money at it. It was something that I was curious about. It excited me. Everybody that I knew, didn't have that opportunity, and I did because I was willing to take the opportunity. It's not that they couldn't have done it too. I was just willing to do more than they were willing to do. And that answered so much for me sexually and sensually and, holistically, because I could justify what I was doing because I was making a substantial amount of income. And now that all that's over and all I have is the story, right? And the awareness from it and all that. I'm like, but that's why I got to help a lot of people. A shaman told me, he goes, no, you're just a healer. And you were healing people on that deep core identification of their root chakra. And that's why we as a society are so lustful, because we're not in our self-identity. And we're always feeling incomplete because, we have to have the other part of our soulmate to be whole. And once we come into harmony, that we are our wholeness, our self, enough for now, but always wanting to be more later because we naturally all want to grow. We either grow, happier or we grow bitter. There's really no neutral there, right? And then those people that would say they're neutral, they're bitter on just, a more passive aggressive way.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? Like,
I know.
You're just like, wow, like that tone, that whatever. But, those are all just awarenesses.
Yeah.
And when we're aware of that, then we can do something about it. That old saying that you can't fix something until it's broken. Well, that's a great sign. Like when we have those lower vibrational thoughts and feelings of like, hey, something's broken. It's not good or bad. It just is. And so now what are we going to do with it? How are we going to respond to this?
Yeah.
This person, this situation, this thing, how are we going to move through it? Because I'm still here, and I love to tell people that all the time about, if you're worried, it's okay. You're in your mind. It won't matter if you're no longer living.
Yeah. We have a unique opportunity. It's not really that unique, right? We all have the opportunity to do it now and
right.
take that
action. That's all we have.
Yeah, that's it. We don't have, there's a lot of talk about, and we're running right at the end here. So it's amazing because we always get together and talk, and we could literally talk for hours about this stuff. It's such a vast topic, but we have time right now to take care of all those things. And the thing is, we never know when that time is going to be over. So we need to take care of it right now. Like, we could have anything that we decide to, right? We just have to take the action to get that, right? And you mentioned that just a second ago. There were other people that could have that. They just chose not to be as committed as you were to having it. And you can have anything you want. We have the technology. We have all these things. You can do it if you choose to commit to it and make it happen. And take that commitment and push it forward. So, dude, thank you so much for being on here with me. We need to do this again for sure. Because
sure, I would love to get my partner on here as well, Robin.
Nice.
So maybe we'll do that.
Cool. So
we'll talk more about enhancing your world or something.
Yeah, for sure. So let everybody know how to find you real quick.
The easiest way is just go to enhancingyourworld.com. That's where you can find the whole community of enhancers. And that's where I'm at. I'm just another enhancer. So I'm in there with everybody else, and we're all equal, and check everybody out. And if they speak true to you in that moment, then I would request that you learn a little bit more about what they're doing. So awesome. Thank you, Jeff, so much for having me on and doing this. It's been a real privilege and joy as always.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for everything. I always enjoy talking to you.
So enjoy, my friend. Have a great one.
Awesome. I'll talk to you soon.